Hello, everyone. Gews back here with a decent surprise. That surprise being that I'm actually doing past promises that I made. In my last video, I brought up the idea of making a video on SCP-3812, and if I were to cover SCP scaling more on this channel, I kind of need to cover this guy. While he is far from the strongest character there is in the verse, he and his cosmology are critically important to the overall scaling of SCP, especially things like the noosphere. So here we are. In this video, I'll be covering the power of SCP-3812, the size of the cosmology scales to, and like a few of his abilities. Just like before, I will be sticking to the original creation of the author. The author behind SCP-3812 is DJ Cactus, and his general canon is known as the Cactus Verse, so I will only be using Cactus Verse articles, with the only exceptions being articles that happen to be cross-linked. I'll also throw in the occasional Word of God statement because they can give us some meaningful insight on the text. If you want a full coverage of the Cactus Verse cosmology, you can find a cosmology blog linked in the description made by a friend of mine named Johnny Phoenix. Also in the description, you can find my personal scaling, so feel free to click on those if you want more. With all of that being said, let's get into the scaling. In order to understand SCP-3812, we must understand the cosmology he is a part of. In my S. Andrew Swan's proposal video, I said that SCP-3812 basically takes its premise to the utmost extreme conclusion, which is very fitting. Just like S. Andrew Swan's proposal, SCP-3812 is all about higher realities that see the one beneath them as fiction. But there isn't just one. There are actually an infinite amount of realities that are stacked on top of each other, forming a stack that has no beginning or end, and it expands infinitely in all directions. These realities are called narratives because higher up narratives create the narratives beneath them by bringing them into existence. They see the lesser realities as mere words on paper and are capable of manipulating the reality of the lower narrative in the exact same way that we can change the story of a comic book by simply telling it differently. Higher narratives are said to supersede lower narratives in a complete and infinite way, and look down on them like how an ordinary person will look over their own thoughts and ideas. To put it in another way, let's go back to S. Andrew Swan's proposal. In that article, we have baseline reality, where the SCP Foundation resides, and above baseline reality, there is a higher reality that consists of the authors that create baseline reality and perceive them as non-existent stories. Now, imagine there is another reality above the Swan author reality that transcends it in the exact same way as they transcend baseline reality and perceives them as fiction. Then imagine reality of the same nature above even that, and they could just continue that process for on and on and on and on forever. An infinite hierarchy of sorts that consists of realities that have qualitative superiorities over each other. You can think of a narrative as a reality's given framework, a critical part of its overall structure that defines its existence. It manages things like chemistry and the laws of physics. It also has its own form of causality, like each one has its own form of causality that is distinct from other narratives. As DJ Cactus explained in a Reddit discussion, when SCP-3812 ascended above his reality, nothing in his original narrative could have killed him, even retroactively, regardless of their power. We see this in action in the article. When SCP-3812's author, Ben, tried to kill SCP-3812 in the past, and only ended up killing previous iterations of him, as the main SCP-3812 in present time is still alive. The narrative handles all these kinds of things and those within it. And to those within it, It is absolute and unchangeable, unable to be stopped once set in motion. But to those of higher narratives, they're open to be freely manipulating, open to be freely manipulated with no consequences to them. One thing that One thing about narratives is that some people think that these narratives correspond to spatial dimensions, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The article paints a pretty clear picture as to how these narratives relate to not just spatial dimensions, but space time in general. Narratives are their own thing entirely, and each narrative transcends space time entirely. And there is a lot that proves this. For one, Humes. Humes are an in-universe measurement system that can be used to quantify the strength or amount of reality within the area, as laid out in the official glossary. Articles like SCP-3001 elaborate that Humes specifically measure space-time and are indeed linked to dimensionality. SCP-3001 is a reality that has a Hume level of 0.032, and because of that, it is described as a non-dimension by Foundation staff, as in it is zero-dimensional. So Humes Humes are a system that measures space-time and can correlate to higher dimensions. And the SCP Foundation has machines that can measure Hume levels, but when they used it on SCP-3812, they were completely unable to detect any Humes from SCP-3812 because it was doing something else. He is connected to and ascends through narratives instead of Humes, thus his power cannot be measured through Humes. This distinction between spatial dimensions and narratives is made even clearer without the Hume explanation. Spatial dimensions are referred to as physical dimensions, meanwhile narratives are referred to as metaphysical dimensions. Even physical space itself is referred to separately from narratives. Narratives are emphasized to be something objectively superior in general, with Foundation staff comparing superiority to the difference between manipulating a rock with your hand and manipulating a rock with an atom bomb. A being with these metaphysical dimensions and exists within a higher narrative are capable of manipulating not just local reality, but reality's whole architecture down to its most fundamental of aspects that encompass these physical dimensions. Even DJ Cactus does a separation, with him saying that SCP-3012 moves through narratives instead of space. So overall, narratives completely transcend space-time and dimensionality. This would make any given narrative at least outerversal, but the total sum of them would be outerversal plus, which is for infinitely layered outerversal stuff. For CSCP users in the audience, this would make the narrative stack 1S, extraversal. Now onto the man himself, SCP-3812, also known as Sam Howell. Not much is known about Sam's past besides the fact that he used to be a non-anomalous human before dying in 1996, where he was seen rising from his grave before disappearing. An author of a higher narrative named Ben decided to do a little experiment to create something by nature that to create something that by nature transcends anything and everything in order to see if the narrative stack is truly infinite. With Sam Howell being the unlucky soul that ended up being the subject, becoming the SCP-3812 that we all know. This ended up working too well, basically, as SCP-3812 ascended beyond Ben and even the creators of Ben. While SCP-3812 is capable of ascending into higher realities, no alterations of his mind were made that would allow him to receive higher levels of reality, still possessing the mental limitations of a regular person. So he is constantly experiencing overexposure from the narratives he is ascending to, becoming insane from it, which is what makes him so dangerous. Now, the main thing about SCP-3012 is his ability to transcend. As Ben created SCP-3812 to be bound by a singular rule. That rule being to supersede everything, including things that superseded him inherently. This isn't some conscious decision, but something that passively occurs because of his very literal nature. And as a result of this, it eventually spirals into him constantly trying to supersede himself. As a result of this, SCP-3812 is endlessly transcending higher and higher into qualitative superiorities, just constantly applying them. This is possible because of a sort of exploit within the narrative stack's mechanics. As explained before, narratives across the stack are created and shaped by the wills of authors, with higher up authors creating and controlling lower narratives. This encompasses the individual actions of people, with lower authors doing things because their authors wrote them to do it. This includes Ben creating SCP-3812, and this goes all the way up to the top. The author behind Ben wrote him creating SCP-3812. The author behind Ben's author, who wrote him creating Ben. The author of that author wrote them creating Ben, and so on and so on. So SCP-3812 is basically piggybacking off the influence of higher authors, thus allowing him to reach qualitatively higher realms. As for further scaling with this power, SCP-3812 is not only able to destroy individual narratives, but is capable of causing a PK class all-in-one existential pandemonium event. That is an apocalyptic event where a being of a higher narrative were to compress all lower narratives into a singular space. Obviously, this is absolutely devastating to those within the lower realities, but they wouldn't be immediately destroyed. Rather, they would become so incomprehensibly intertwined with each other that the boundaries between them all would cease to exist and all conscious thought would be annihilated. And then they would be destroyed. Pretty intense, but at the absolute peak of his power, depicted in the article, it is repeatedly said that SCP-3812 will inevitably breach the narrative stack entirely, where he will continue to supersede himself. But wait, that doesn't make much sense, does it? SCP-3812's transcendence ability, as I described, is based around the power of higher authors. So if he were to so much transcend all of them in the narratives they control, then he shouldn't be transcending anymore. Which rolls us nicely into our next and final section. At some point in 2022, DJ Cactus would give us another Word of God statement that is not only extremely interesting with huge implications, but perfectly explains away the aforementioned contradiction. In it, DJ Cactus not only confirms that SCP-3812 and the Paragon series take place within the same cosmology, but also confirms the existence of multiple narrative stacks that form their own hierarchy, with the Paragon series existing in a quote-unquote lower narrative stack. This confirms at least two narrative stacks, the one presented in the SCP-3812 article, and the stack that the Paragon series takes place in, with SCP-3812 transcending into a plausible third narrative stack above the other two. While we are never told the amount of narrative stacks that exist, given how SCP-3812 is capable of transcending through individual stacks within a finite amount of time, along with how his ability generally works, and the fact that it's emphasized to be something that will last forever, there is most likely an infinite amount of these narrative stacks that see lower ones as fiction. All of their narratives that build them up, all equally non-existent to them. What does all of this mean? Well, even if the base narrative stack, as I originally described, is is Outerverse level plus, then this narrative stack that stands above it and collectively sees its whole as fiction, then it must represent a jump above regular qualitative superiorities in Outerversal as a whole. It would have a meta qualitative superiority over it and would be straight in the high universal level territory. Here's a definition for what meta qualitative superiority is. Feel free to pause and read it if you want. Each of the infinite narrative stacks should have a similar superiority, each one representing a higher meta jump. And until this narrative stack hierarchy should consist of infinite meta jumps. Or, in other words, really fucking high and high reversal level. Far beyond what character sets and profiles has in their tiering system. While SCP-3812 wouldn't ever scale to the entirety of this stack of stacks, you could reach arbitrarily high levels into them. Like just go on and on and on, like get ridiculously high into them. So overall, SCP-3812 is pretty damn powerful, but to tell you the truth, none of this gets anywhere near close to the peak of the SCP cosmology. In fact, the narrative stacks are remarkably low into it. SCP-3812 isn't even the strongest entity within the Cactus verse, and he is still beneath deities like the Paragons, is and is not, and potentially even other anomalies like SCP-2935, which is the old death cave that kills everyone. To recap, SCP-3812 is outer-versal and constantly ascends to higher levels of outer-versal as he scales up in outer-versal level plus structure. Outer-versal level plus being the tier for things that have infinite qualitative superiorities, just infinitely layered outer-versal constructs. However, SCP-3812 has even higher potential and could reach higher verse levels of power. To put it simply, those guys from S. Andrew Swan's proposal are absolutely nothing in comparison to this guy. That'll be it for this video. I hope you people enjoyed it. With this video out, the possibilities for future videos are kind of endless because a lot of SCP scaling hinges on the SCP-3812 narrative stacks. The next video of mine will most likely be a versus match between the Scarlet King and Zalgo. I have a lot to say about that particular matchup. Anyway, that'll be it for today. See you all later.